Hello there and welcome the Virtual Space Hero community. A big welcome currently from the south of Austria. So let's test now our streaming platform here and see how the bandwidth holds through. I'm happy to have you with us. We're again streaming to our three platforms. You know, LinkedIn Live is our main platform, the LinkedIn Live situation here. We are also streaming to Facebook and to YouTube. And I see that you're already connecting. We got a lot of questions also beforehand. Thank you very much for that, because we are going to talk about a super essential topic also for 2021. So last year in 2020, all events, not only our companies, organizations, remote work, so we moved to a remote situation, but all events also started or continued, some of them, to be online, right? And one thing that we figured out that is super important when it comes to virtual event production is not only the technical setup and that we have a nice branding, but we need to create a tremendous energy in the virtual space. And who do we need for that? We do need a tremendous virtual MC. And that's why we picked up on this topic for tonight's LinkedIn Live. What does it take to become or to be a virtual MC? And I'm super happy that I have with me here on my stage very soon a tremendous virtual MC, somebody who has been working and producing big events, smaller events, and has a real great record as a virtual MC since the last year as well. So I'm happy to welcome here and introduce to you Sean Specie, our virtual MC expert here. Hi, Sean. And immediately we're going to say hi. Yes, go ahead.
And this is why usually I recommend a virtual MC, have someone else run the technology for you. I'm here in our studio doing it alone, but I'm so glad to be here with you, Barbara.
Thank you so much for connecting. Where are you connecting from today?
I'm just outside of the metro Atlanta, Georgia area in the United States.
Fantastic. Sean, it is a tremendous pleasure to have you with us, because I was following you on LinkedIn and I always see exciting postings about the events that you are virtual MCing. But let me ask you one question. How did you get into event production business in general? And then how did you get into the virtual event production business?
Yeah, that's a really fun question to answer. So how I got into the virtual event, really the virtual event was forced because of COVID. But the actual event space, I got into it because of just a passion. So I actually grew up in Florida in the United States, and I grew up on a lake. My parents had a house on a lake, and most holiday weekends, we would have friends and family come over. And what we would do is we would spend pretty much a half a day getting ready for everyone. And then they would come and we would take them out on the boat. We would take them out. You'll have to forgive me. My boss, who's also an MC, is like, he's crashing the party right now. He's like popping his head in. He's jumping in the studio. And he's like in the background trying to do what he can to distract me. This is real life. This is real life with a studio, right? So it's fun. But so I grew up in basically like I grew up in a setting where my family would help people enjoy what we had. And that's a lot what we get to do in the events industry. You spend numerous hours just preparing for the audience, whether virtual or whether they're going to come to your venue. And that's what we were doing. Our house was our venue, and I would teach them how to water ski. I would teach them how to do stuff behind the boat. And then we would have to clean up afterwards. But what's interesting is it was so fun and it was so enjoyable because we had a good time and people learned something. And so that's one of the reasons why I love events and why I love the fact that I still get to do them now.
Oh, super. Great. Fantastic. It's a nice story because it's something that you sort of cultivated from very early on at the end, the event production, to say so. And clearly you enjoy being on stage and also facilitating the events. So with the virtual events, you said that it all started with COVID last year. How did that go? How did you manage to acquire the skills that you needed with all the technical aspects that you might not have been familiar with before that?
Yeah, I think, and I can't remember who said it. I'll have to Google it in a second, but it's the quote that necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so when COVID shut down the events industry, so our business, and you'll have to forgive me, I didn't actually answer the question. So I met my boss at a previous job when I was doing events for schools in the United States, and then he was doing corporate events. And so I started working with him about 5 years ago, well, full time, but then another 10, almost 10 years ago now as a contractor for 5 years. And so the interesting part about when COVID hit is that we're just like everybody else. We used to do in-person events primarily. And when I say everybody else, I know that there's some people who have been doing virtual events for a long time now. And we had a little bit of experience, mostly with an in-person event that was being live streamed to multi-sites. We had a little bit of experience there. So then when COVID hit, it was March 11th is 2020 is when the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. And I remember because my boss and I, Billy, who you just saw, he popped his head in. Me and him, we had a flight to New York and back again from Atlanta that day. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, we were texting each other. We were like, do we go? Do we not go? And we were going to meet with a couple of really big brands to have in-person meetings to talk about different things. Like one of them was the Super Bowl. It turns out that we were some of the last visitors to ever visit the NFL office before this whole thing shut down. And yeah, it was crazy. Like the woman that we met with, Kathleen, she said that like after our meeting, she went back to her office, packed up her stuff, and she still hasn't been to her office in New York. And so we came back from that trip and we got a bunch more cancellations. And on a Friday afternoon, I had the idea of building a studio because we had a small warehouse space and we had some cameras and stuff. And I basically was like, we're going to have to do it. Like we have no choice. Everyone's going to go forced to do this. And so from there, we just started figuring it out. We did an event, one of our first events that we did, we accidentally on a Mac, on like an Apple computer, if you take, I think it's like 4 fingers and you swipe the wrong way, it'll hit backwards in your web browser. We did that by accident. We did it by accident with 200. We had a client that hired us for a virtual event. It was 250 people watching, and we locked ourselves out of the event for 5 minutes. And we were the producers and the MC of it. Yeah, like most stressful 5 minutes I've ever had. It was crazy.
I assume that many of our viewers can relate to such happenings that to many of us happened in March and April and are still happening to many of us, because it is just like one click that is not correct and it can already shut down or close the event window, for example. Dear God. Yep. But let me ask you one question, Sean. You were saying the 22nd of March, it was when WFA, the World Health Organization, WHO, declared a pandemic situation. Was it then?
March 11th. Yeah.
March 11th, not 21st or 22nd. Do you still remember what happened then? What about you out there, folks, Virtual Space Hero community? Let us know if you remember what were you doing March 11th. Because I remember, at that day, I was looking for an apartment in Spain and we got hit with the pandemic situation while looking for an apartment. And we had to stay in an Airbnb for the first 3 months because Spain was totally shut down.
That's crazy. Yeah. I remember I was sitting in a bar in New York having lunch. It was like an Irish pub restaurant. And we started getting nervous. I was like, are we going to be able to like fly home? And it was crazy. So yeah, put in chat if you're watching this, put in comments like, where were you when you heard the news? What country or city, or do you remember like a specific location? I'd be curious to see.
Absolutely. And so then, you accidentally swiped to the wrong direction on the Mac event. How did it continue, your virtual events production and your virtual emceeing as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, how it continued for that one event, if you're wondering, is I had to restart my computer and then go back into the program, and it let us in and we were able to finish the event. And that client has been the one that has hired us to do the most virtual events for them. We did another 9 after that, like a series. And then just last Friday, actually, we produced a big award ceremony for them. It was super fun. And then from there, we just kept going. We We did an all-out blitz where we did free virtual events, we did free webinars, we did a free 2-day summit where we invited speakers in to come and be a speaker from our studio. We did a bunch of different things. Ricky in the comments said Dallas, Texas at Chili's. Tamara said she was in London, was still in denial, and then fully operating, returned to Dublin. Yep, I get it, to full lockdown. Yeah, lockdown 13th is when it happened here also. So it's interesting what we can remember, what we can't. And so we started posting on social media. We started basically just sharing on social media and in blogs, and on YouTube. Our YouTube has kind of blown up with like icebreakers for virtual events is a favorite one of ours. And through that, slowly we lost most of our business. We were not profitable for most of the year last year, and then finally in the last quarter in Q4, we were a profitable business, which is a good thing. And then January, February, and March have been good for us for this year.
Fantastic. Oh my God. Oh, it seems like here, well, it won't help our LinkedIn Live viewers, but it seems that there are some struggles on the LinkedIn live stream. So in case you also have a YouTube stream there, thanks a lot for posting, Thomas. Maybe also the others can comment if it's working properly. If not, you go to the YouTube live stream and can also watch and comment there, or to Facebook if you watch out for Virtual Space Hero. Thanks a lot for letting us know. Sean, so we're talking about virtual emceeing, and that's also something that you did before, but in in-person events. So what is the role for you? Maybe did it change somehow of a virtual MC? And are there any aspects that you would add to the skill set that you need as a virtual MC compared to an in-presence MC? What would you say?
Yeah, definitely some added new skills. And there's definitely some things that translated and translated really well. But then there's also a lot of new skills. And I think some of them have really it's been helpful for me to see both sides. So our company is fairly small. We've got 4 different MCs on staff with us. And those are our only full-time employees. We also produce for each other. I mean, before we went live, Barbara, you got to talk to Ricky from our team and see and how he was helping change camera angles. Sometimes, some days I'm doing that, and Billy, who popped his head in, he'll be standing here where I am, and he might be the MC. Sometimes he's at the tech table, and so knowing different features and functions, it's been interesting. It can be a little bit overwhelming if you're not used to it, because it's a lot like producing on television all of a sudden. Because I'm standing here, I'm looking, and we'll do a quick orientation. This will be fun. I get to test this out. So I'm looking at camera 1 right now. And then if I switch here, I've got camera 2. And then if I switch here, I've got camera 3. And knowing which one I'm on is super important. And so if I go back to camera 1, it's important to look at camera 1. So that's something new that I've had to get used to. And it's really tempting to look at your face, Barbara, but your face is not in the middle of the camera. Your face is like right off screen. So if I do that the whole time, if it just doesn't look great on camera. So there's been some small technical things. And then as far as an MC, right? So if we think back to in-person conferences, at an in-person conference, the MC is going to do housekeeping at the beginning, where they're like, hey, welcome to our conference. If you need the restrooms, they're down the hall over here. They might tell you what the
bar is there.
Yeah, all the, like, where refreshments are. And so what's interesting is even now you can still do some housekeeping items, but as the MC, you have to know, if you're on Zoom, how do you rename yourself on Zoom? If you're on LinkedIn Live or YouTube Live or StreamYard, like, how do you use the chat function? And on AirMeet or Hopin, do you use emojis that fly up the screen? And all the little, like, if you send them to breakout rooms, it's not like, hey, go down the hall and follow the sign. It's no, you need to click here and click here and click here. And so it's a lot more technical. And it's interesting because there's less on the travel side, and there's less of the in-person kind of stuff. So there's some of the things that we don't do as much of, but then there's a lot more technical stuff that we do a lot of now.
And I think, just to pick up on something that you were saying, I think it's super important, because sometimes people think that a virtual MC, he or she keeps the role of just talking to the audience and not necessarily needing to know all these technical things. But I also believe it's hyper important, because whatever happens, you need to be able also to take on the producer's role, maybe if something happens. And therefore, I think these different angles, to know the different angles as a virtual MC, as a producer, tag part here and there, it's really very, very important. Let me ask you one further question. When it comes to the technical skills that you were also mentioning, well, you need to be aware of what camera to look into. Of course, camera 1, 2, 3. And I saw your setup. I loved it, because as I told you, I'm just having like sort of a very simple construction that holds my cell phone to grab in or pick up my second camera there, but it also works. Anyways, I think it reminded me a lot about virtual trainers who were always struggling at the beginning, like the first month or weeks maybe, to look into the camera. If we just think about the virtual one camera and one lens setup here, right? It's very similar to what you were describing.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is there's some people, it just depends on what you have available, right? You can do a full production with just one camera. And you can still make one of the reasons why we have two different camera angles is if you watch a Netflix show or a movie on TV, or go to the cinemas, they're constantly changing angles. And so we do it for production quality. You can do that if you're producing from your phone or from your computer. You can literally like pick up your laptop and move it around, and you can walk around with it, and it makes it really engaging. But it's difficult. I mean, we used to have this big note card that would be taped right above, like if this was the camera, it was taped right here. And it literally said like, look here. And we still do that sometimes if we have someone new, because we want them to just focus on just one camera. We don't do look here and look here and look here. We just say, just look here. And yeah, exactly. Well, and because the other thing is I've got a screen here, and this is our podcast setup. So I'll go back to this screen so that everyone can see the different arrangement. This is not what we do for events. This is kind of like for a podcast or a streaming. And so over here, you can see I've got a Zoom wall. So when we are going live on a virtual event, we will put different people's faces up here, and we'll log in with a different computer and have a whole Zoom wall over here. And then behind me right here, this is where we have slides. And right now I have this desk and everything because I'm controlling it myself. But when I'm the MC of the event, I'm not clicking anything. I have a microphone on, and I've got someone behind the scenes at my table over here, because I've got to think about the next speaker. I've got to think about the next question that I need to ask. I've got to focus on what are they saying right now to think about what's coming up next. And so it's a constant movement of what's happening. And we don't want our MCs to be thinking about all of that. But because not only that, but if I go back to this angle, you might be able to see a little bit of it. But there's a light here. There's a light behind me. I've got like 8 different lights behind me on the floor. There's another light that you can't see over here. It's kind of overwhelming, and it's a little bit of sensory overload if you're not used to it.
Absolutely. And in terms of energy, because we were saying, and we were also discussing a little bit before we were going live, that the role of an MC in an in-presence, but also in a virtual event, is like to create that energy level, right? And I see when you speak, the way you interact, you bring in a lot of energy to this LinkedIn Live today. What would you say in terms of more or less energy needed if you think back about in-presence events, or now as you're also doing some hybrid events? Is it much more energy you need for virtual events, or is it not? Or what is different when it comes to your energy involvement?
So I think the main difference for the energy involvement is when you're on stage. If you know anything about the theater, they tell you in theater to be like large hand movements. It's going to feel weird at first, but to be animated, to have big facial expressions, to use voice intonation. So like sometimes I'll slow down and I'll whisper and I'll use my voice in different ways. So there's different things that you can do. But as far as, so I'm extroverted. I love being around people. And so the biggest difference that I've found is my energy output is about the same as I would be at an in-person event. But because I'm extroverted, how I get energy is I get energy from being around other people. Yeah, you too, right? And so if I'm at an in-person event, I can do this literally all day long. And virtually I can also, but when I'm in person, I still have energy. And if we're doing this virtually, usually I'm just like drained. But what does help is, again, going back to this camera angle, I've got if I can see people's faces on the Zoom wall and I can like interact with them, it feels like I'm in the room with them. And so that is really helpful. And if you're wondering, well, how can you replicate this? I don't have a studio. You can just do this where if this is like your TV above your fireplace, you can just put people's faces on that TV and stand next to it. So yeah, it's the energy output. No one's quite asked me that before, and I haven't thought about that, but there is a major difference where usually at the end of the event, I've still got energy for days. It usually takes me a while to fall asleep, but virtually I'm like, all right, I'm tired.
But you know what I find interesting is that I usually, when I think about virtual events or virtual teaching, virtual trainings, whatever, I do have the feeling that it takes much more energy from my side to do that. And I'm more exhausted after like 3 hours of virtual training than I am in an in-presence training. But I never thought about what you were mentioning, that it is because I'm getting energy from the crowd, because I rather thought that it is because I'm well aware of where to look at. And of course, looking at a camera lens is very exhaustive. Or as we know, our brain tries to figure out what is happening around the small tiles that we are looking at. And that's also one of the reasons why the Zoom fatigue, or why we are just more fatigued when we're in an online setting. But I never thought about what you were mentioning. I think that's really important to consider, that we can get also in a virtual setting the energy back from the others, for example, through that Zoom wall that you are having there, which I think it's amazing. And we see, yeah, Thomas is saying he loves your setup. Yeah, he loves to invest some money on his virtual DJing one. Yes, I totally can imagine that. And virtual DJs also, I assume that you had also music involved in your virtual events, because in Virtual Space Hero, we love to start with our DJ Virtual Space Hero. And therefore, thanks a lot, Thomas, for being with us here, because we love music. And music is also something that creates a high level of energy. But you also need to have at least a few people in the room who start moving, right? Because if you don't have them, it's like everybody coming to a music area and nobody moves. It's also like a weird thing. Cool. Did you work with music?
Yes, we do. So we have like I DJ, my boss DJs. We've got another guy who's way better than we all are. He's an amazing DJ. And music, like I love that you brought up music. It's super important because there's a movie I love to talk about, and the movie's name is it was Mrs. Doubtfire. It was a Robin Williams movie, and Robin Williams played this character, and it was a comedy, right? And Robin Williams is hilarious. He like I loved him as an actor. And someone took that movie, like the previews, and chopped it up, and they put like a horror, like a scary movie soundtrack to it. And if you watch the preview of it, like if you watch it, like I'm convinced it would be a terrifying movie, even though it was hilarious, because they changed the music. And so, yes, music is a huge important of it. And I love that even for your LinkedIn Live, you had some music playing, you had some graphics that were changing. It kind of sets the tone. And so we'd use it for award ceremonies. You can set it for a certain tone. If you're doing a virtual gala and doing a fundraising, you might want it to be more somber and more slow. Yeah, Tomas, I see that you said that you love that movie. It was a hilarious movie, but Google the or look it up on YouTube, the Mrs. Doubtfire horror movie or something, and it's really scary. But yes, music is super important.
I remember that we were running sort of an awards ceremony on Zoom in a very small event, and we were using some film music there to give it a more dramatic sort of setup when we were handing over the virtual certificate, like da, 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 and it was everybody was like feeling super emotional when the music came up, just because it is a less emotional setting when you're in a virtual event receiving an award, right? And that also worked fantastically. Let me ask you one question. We were hearing a lot, and I also saw a few posts of yours about interacting with the audience, because we do know, as a virtual MC or a virtual event in general, interaction with the audience and engagement of the audience is something that is being discussed extensively. What is your take on the role of a virtual MC when it comes to interaction management with the audience? What are your possibilities?
So what's interesting, this is again a great topic to think about, because this is the question that everybody started asking after they finished figuring out, like, okay, how do I do this? How do I even put on a virtual event? Then they figured out, and there's a gentleman by the name of Tim Woodring, and he is the chief strategy officer of a company called Unbridled, and a production company out of Colorado in the United States. And so me and him were just talking about this, and he talks about there's kind of three phases right now that have been evolving that he recognizes. Phase one was, I just got to figure it out. Let me just see how I can put on a virtual event. And then phase two is, now that I know how to put on a virtual event, how do I make it engaging? And then he's talking about phase three, which is once the world starts opening up and vaccinations start rolling out, do we choose in-person, virtual, or hybrid, which is a separate conversation. But for the engagement piece, if you think about it and you write it down, which I have, because I've been talking about it for a while, there's really only 7 ways that you can interact right now with your audience. 7. Yep.
Let's start.
Okay. So number 1 is what we've been doing on StreamYard with the audience. It's chat, right? So that's the most common way, is with your audience on chat. Like, I can't see the audience. I can't hear the audience. They don't have video on. They don't have video on. So chat is one way. The other way,
probably, as we were trying it from the beginning onwards, we had also to sort of encourage them more. We were using here the banners to engage the audience, to provide us with their questions. But I could have also done it a little bit more extensively, like verbally, to engage with the audience. Let us know your questions there, people. And that's what I'm doing now. So we only have like 12 minutes left. So let us know your questions, and don't forget also to put your comments in here. Sorry for interrupting, Sean.
No, that's
First
great.
One, chat. And we have it.
Chat is definitely one way to interact. And when I say interact, what I mean is, like, we can communicate with them and they can interact with us. That's what I mean by interact. So they can interact with us, because what you're doing is you're interacting with them through the screen, which is kind of a way, but unless the audience is with us on video, it depends on the platform. They can't interact with us on the screen, right? So now if the audience were on like a Zoom and they could screen share, so that's a second way. So chat is number 1. You're doing it, and then sometimes they can do screen share, which is number 2. There's some systems can use polls. Polls are number 3. Then of course there's what you and I are doing right now. There's video on, and there's audio on. So that's 4 and 5, video on and audio on. Sometimes you have just audio. Sometimes you have just video. So that's why they're separate. And then the last two ways to interact with your audience are emojis, and it depends on the platform. Like AirMeet that you were talking about, or like a Facebook Live, they can click like the like and the thumbs up and the hearts, and it flies up on the screen. So that's one way of interacting. And then the last one is sometimes we do like trivia games, and we'll say, hey, on a separate device. So on your phone, go to this website and type this in, and let's play trivia together. And so you can do it. You can use WhatsApp to interact with people. You could use a Google Messenger or comment back and forth and do things that way, but using a separate device. So those are the only 7 ways. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but really everything else kind of falls underneath those categories, because one person, for example, was telling me, well, what about if they were to hold up a piece of paper and it had a word written on there? Well, I can't see that unless they have their video on. So I would classify that under video on. So, so yeah, those are the 7 ways.
What is for you, if we think about all these possibilities, do you prefer, for example, events where you can always see the others and use like extensively the video feature, or do you prefer polling or the chat? Do you have any preference, or does it depend a lot on other factors?
Yeah, it does depend on the factors. Like it always depends on what you have available. So StreamYard is very cost effective. So is Zoom. Zoom is a fairly, you can upgrade to have 500 people on your Zoom with video on for only $50 a month. So like if you have a basic Zoom package, you can just pay $50 and upgrade. And then or even $90, I think it is, to have 1,000 people and they can all turn video on. So those are very cost-effective ways of doing it. And then our favorite ways are, of course, because I've shown you a couple of times now, but our couple of favorite ways is I love to have like a huge chat right here, and I love to have people's faces right here and interact with them. And if we're doing like an awards ceremony, then what we'll do is we'll say, all right, everybody unmute yourself and cheer for Barbara or cheer for Tomas, who just won this award. And it's awkward and it's weird and everybody's yelling at the same time, but it's still fun. And then so chat, and then using polls. Those are some of the basic ones. And then if you really want to do like trivia, we haven't found a better way. Than there's a system called CrowdPurr. It's crowdpurr.com, and it's so fun and it's so easy to do. And like on the screen behind me, I can put up a leaderboard of individuals. You can divide people into teams. So it's a really, really fun thing to use.
It is. What do you use it for? It's audience engagement, but what does it exactly help you with CrowdPurr?
So CrowdPurr is primarily for people that want to have either just fun or they want to also do team building. Because a lot of times, so there was a company that hired us. They had 300, really about 900 people, but they had 2 groups. There's some people chose not to participate, and that's fine. But we did 2 separate events for them. We did a United States version and we did a European version because they're an international company. And so what we did is we separated them out, and they wanted to have team building and to compete as teams. So they wanted camaraderie. They created team names. They picked like bands. So we had like the Beatles versus Destiny's Child and stuff like that, which was super fun. And then when we did the trivia, we played other games using chat. We used polls. We used video. So we did games, and then it all led up to the trivia, which was they logged in, they selected their team name, and then they competed. And at the end, the company, the winning team, got to pick what nonprofit the company was going to donate X number of dollars to. And it was really fun. So we use it for interaction, we use it for fun, and we use it for team building.
Fantastic. And I see already Tomas is thanking for the Academy Award that he got from you. And we're happy to cheer up for you, Tomas, of course, here.
Here's your trophy. Here it is.
And that is fantastic, because whatever object you have around, also something that you can perfectly use in such settings. And sometimes we forget about that. Well, you in your amazing studio, you have much more even there. Let me ask you one question. So because we are slightly coming to an end there. So folks out there, Virtual Space Hero community, let us know your final question so that we pick that up in the last 5 minutes now. Sean, before we go to the questions of our audience, when it comes to inclusion, because of course the role of the virtual MC is to interact, to engage the audience, but there is one topic that I've been looking at also quite a lot since last year. It is inclusion in the virtual space. I'm looking at it from a team perspective, from a leadership perspective, but also in a teaching or training environment, to say so. When it comes to a virtual event and the role of the virtual MC, let's say that you see all the people or that you don't see them, how do you make sure that all participants feel included? What would be their possibilities that you ensure that as a virtual MC?
So the first question or the first thought that goes to my head to answer that question is to simply pause and to think about who are the different types of audiences that you're going to have. And if you simply do that and consider them, I think that is an amazing first step. Like, Barbara,
Mhm.
are you on Clubhouse? Have you heard of this new app called Clubhouse? Have you heard of this, or are you on it? No?
You probably know that I feel super excluded from Clubhouse because I'm Android.
Ah, okay. Hey, well, I know that you can get an iPod or an iPad if you want to, but I have heard that it's coming soon in the next couple months. So
But
when you're
yeah,
on, you
whoever out there wants an invitation, I got several in my inbox, so I can't
okay?
spread them around because I can't go on Clubhouse.
Hey, and like I would love to connect with you, Barbara. We got to host a room together on Clubhouse when you do get in, and so the interesting thing is because Clubhouse is, and I know that it's not very inclusive right now because Android users you can't, right? But the interesting thing is because it's audio only, there are still some people that are on Clubhouse right now that are either deaf or hard of hearing and or they're visually impaired. And so there is a system that people have started to use, which I've started using in my own rooms, where because it's audio only, they can't lip read. And so they're using transcription services. They have like Google has one or like Otter.ai. And so it's listening so that they can read what's happening and then they can interact. And so the interesting thing about the way that they do that is once it came about and I heard that people were happening, immediately I was like, okay, well, this is a really cool and simple system. You simply say, hi, this is, and you say your name, and then you ask your question or you give your thought. And then when you're done talking, you just say, and I'm handing the mic to someone else, or I'm done talking. And then someone else will start from there. And it helps the people who are deaf and hard of hearing for the transcription services because they can clearly see when you're done talking and who the next person is that's talking, because it's not an automated system that's built into the app yet. And so I think the number one thing to focus on is just being aware. Like when we used to have in-person events, we used to ask the questions, well, if we're going to do something like an interactive game or an activity on stage, then you can we would ask the question, well, what will the extroverts think of this? And what will the introverts think of this? Because the extroverts, a lot of times, they're going to be the first ones to raise their hand. They want to be on stage. They want to be in the spotlight. But the introverts, a lot of times, they'll be a little bit more reserved and they don't want to raise their hand right away. They might eventually, but they're not the first ones to like crave the spotlight. And so even just the fact that you're stopping to consider who your audience is, that's one way of being more inclusive because you can then start to ask the right questions and there's sometimes just simple solutions that you can have, like the Clubhouse example that I was talking about.
Besides that, Clubhouse per se is exclusive, right? But okay, not to mention that. But I see there, so all those of you out there who feel like a little bit excluded from the Clubhouse experience that was so on vogue in LinkedIn like 3 weeks ago, no other post than Clubhouse posts. Anyways, we have also an Android alternative, so Stereo app. Never heard of that either, but apparently that's our way to go. But okay. Thanks a lot for and I think it's a really, really good example that you were giving in terms of how to consider what sort of who is your audience, who is coming, and also maybe in a pre-questionnaire, see what different or special needs there might be. If we think about 2021 now, also 2020, we already have quite a few in the second half of the year, quite a few hybrid events in some countries. And I do know that you were also facilitating hybrid events. What is your suggestion or your recommendation? What needs to be considered when we talk about hybrid events, Sean?
So the first thing that needs to be considered is, number one, it's going to be two separate experiences. It just is. It's going to be different. And I think the earlier we recognize that, the better. Because so like in the United States, the Super Bowl every year is a really big deal, right? I know that in the United Kingdom, there's Wimbledon, the tennis tournament, or there's different soccer matches, right? And so those, if you think about them, those are hybrid events to some degree. You have an in-person audience and you have something that's happening that they're watching and they're participating in. And then there's TV cameras everywhere, and they're streaming it online, and they're streaming it to television shows. And so recognizing like what's interesting is if we start there, well, we can realize that hybrid events have been happening a lot longer than we might think about. And even like TV shows, like a live rehearsed TV show where it's in front of a live studio audience, they like to say, the Tonight Show, just different kinds of things. Those are hybrid events. And so we can learn a lot from what they've done, camera angles and exclusive interviews, and like the people that are in the stands at maybe a soccer match or at a football game or a tennis match, they're not going to be able to see the TV and hear the interview with the player that just got injured or with the coach that just did something. But the people on watching on TV, they can, and it can be engaging that way. And so just recognizing, and then when you're at the event, you can just simply call it out. Usually the announcers, they'll talk straight to the camera and they'll say, hey, if you're at home watching this, and we can do that online. We can do that if it's, so I've had the pleasure of being an MC for a couple of hybrid events now, and I will talk to the camera, and then I will talk to the audience, and then I will talk back to the camera, and then I'll talk back to the audience. And again, like going back to the Zoom wall, what we will also do is we will put a Zoom wall up sometimes in the room with us, and we will have the people, and then we'll have a camera angle pointed at the audience that's in the room with us. And we'll say, hey, can you guys give a round of applause for everyone who's on Zoom with us here? Hey, in Zoom, this is a game that's just for you guys. Like this round of game is just for you. I want you to put in chat the answer to this trivia question. And so you can make it interactive in different ways. And just recognizing it's two different experiences, then you can start to plan for both and put yourself in the shoes of both audiences.
I think that's a very interesting aspect that you're raising. It's two different experiences. We need to take care of that and to consider that. And another point is, I was talking to many other virtual events or hybrid events producers, because I'm purely virtual events production. And they also told me it's like really organizing two different events. So also in terms of workload or how much does it take, it's like organizing two different events, even though it is one. I'm not sure what was your experience on that?
Yes. I mean, yes, to some degree it is and it isn't. It depends on how you want to handle it. Like, I personally think that there's two different types of hybrid events, really. Like, there's a hybrid event, which is two separate experiences, like what I was talking about. And then there's also a live streamed event. A live streamed event is you have cameras pointed at the room, and it's almost like producing a show where the audience isn't interacting. If you want the audience to interact and you want them to feel thought for and you want them to feel cared for, then that's more of a hybrid event. And then you're starting to plan two different events. So I think that sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to try to think for everything. And sometimes it's just okay to be streaming, like, because people will go to YouTube and they'll just watch a YouTube video, right? And that's okay. But so it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Do you want the audience to be able to interact? Do you want them to have a separate experience, a great experience? Then you're thinking about more of a hybrid event.
Cool. Thanks so much, Sean. I think really there is, it's a big step for many of us also to go into hybrid events production. What is your take on it? This is the last question that I got before we even started today's LinkedIn live stream. So what is your virtual event outlook 2021? Just a very quick answer to that, please.
I think they're here to stay. I think that there's a lot of events that have gone virtual that will never go back to being in person. I think there's some events that got canceled that as soon as they can, they're going to go back to being in person. I think that there's some they're going to forever be a hybrid event, because now there's some people that are just used to being comfortable. And to your point of inclusion, you and I, you're in Austria and I'm in Atlanta, and we can do a LinkedIn live event from two different places. And it's convenient for both of us. So I think that it's a good thing, and I think they're here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally my opinion as well. Thanks so much, Sean. It was tremendous for me seeing your professional setup there. And it was tremendous also to meet your colleagues and your boss, whoever was popping in. I was just looking for somebody to pop in also into my live stream here, but nobody was showing up. Anyways, I'm going to have a guest prepared for you, Virtual Space Hero community. Maybe next week somebody will pop into my live stream here. It was
I love it.
tremendous having you with us, Sean. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. To all of you out there, definitely connect with Sean, follow him. Very good postings and insights about what it takes to be a virtual MC. So thanks so much for being with us here. And we are meeting in a few minutes backstage for a virtual cocktail. But I hear that you have a real beer, right, in your super studio there.
I do.
Okay. I see you in a bit, Sean. Thank you so much again for being with us here on Virtual Space, your LinkedIn Live.
Thank you so much, Barbara. This has been fun. See ya.
See ya. Bye. Oh, thank you so much, Virtual Space Hero community, for being with us again. And those of you who were on LinkedIn, I'm sorry, something apparently did not work with the live stream there. Don't worry, many of you switched to YouTube, and I saw the discussion there. Just go there. We have the recording available for you on YouTube, but also on Facebook, whatever platform you prefer. What is coming up next week? Next Thursday, we're going live again on Thursday at 6 p.m. And we're going to talk about something that is also pretty important for virtual emceeing. We're talking about storytelling. And we're going to talk about how to use stories at work with Rand Screen, also connecting from the US. And with that, I'm saying again, thank you very much for joining us here on our Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn live stream. You know that we're going live once a week. We have the whole guest lineup already on our webpage. If you go to virtualspacehero.com, you can find the lineup until July 2021. And I'm saying thank you for following us, being with us, letting us know your questions and your pain points. We are going to discuss them here on this stage. Thanks a lot and enjoy your evening. Bye.